It started, I guess, the way most things like that do. Small, almost imperceptible shifts, cracks in the foundation you don't even notice until the whole damn house is leaning. For years, Kevin and we were the blueprint, the couple everyone pointed to at barbecues, at the holiday parties, the ones who had that quiet, settled comfort that spoke of permanence. We met in college, a stupid frat party, cliché as hell, but it stuck. 10 years, 5 of them married. We had a nice house in the suburbs, the kind with a 2-car garage and a decent yard for the dog. Our lives were predictable, comforting, everything I thought I wanted. Kevin worked in finance, long hours, but he loved it. He was stable, reliable, kind, a good man. He'd bring me coffee in bed on Saturday mornings, even if I was already awake. He'd remember the obscure little anniversaries, like the day we adopted Buster, our golden retriever. He made me feel safe, loved, even. But somewhere along the line, loved started to feel like expected, like part of the furniture. We'd talk about our day, sure, over dinner. Him about market trends, me about my marketing job at the agency. Then we'd watch some Netflix, maybe scroll through our phones, and head to bed. The sex had become routine, predictable, a chore sometimes. It wasn't bad, not really. It just wasn't electric. It had been a long time since anything felt electric. I told myself it was normal. This was what real life looked like after the honeymoon phase, after the whirlwind. This was maturity. This was partnership. But a part of me, a small, selfish, nagging part, kept wondering if this was all there was. If this quiet hum of contentment was the loudest my heart was ever going to beat again. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the mirror, mid-30s, still decent, I thought. But there was a weariness in my eyes that hadn't been there at 25, a subtle tightening around my mouth that I recognized as resignation. Then came the new client, huge account, a tech startup from Silicon Valley opening an East Coast hub. My agency landed it, and I was put in charge of the launch campaign. It meant a lot of late nights, a lot of meetings, a lot of pressure. And it meant working closely with their head of marketing, a guy named Daniel. Daniel wasn't conventionally handsome, not in the way Kevin was with his clean-cut look and broad shoulders. Daniel was taller, lankier, with a perpetually rumpled look that somehow suited him. He had this unruly dark hair that kept falling into his eyes, and a laugh that started low and rumbled up, infectious. He was smart, ridiculously smart, and driven, but not in an arrogant way. He was passionate about his work, about the product, about ideas. He saw things differently, and he made me see things differently too. Our first few weeks were all business, brainstorming sessions that stretched into late evenings, fueled by takeout and lukewarm coffee. We were in the war room, surrounded by whiteboards covered in diagrams and sticky notes. He challenged my ideas, not dismissively, but playfully, pushing me to think bigger, to articulate my vision more clearly, and I did the same for him. There was an energy between us, a spark that I hadn't felt in, well, a decade. It was exciting, it was intellectual, it was stimulating, it was everything my home life wasn't anymore. Kevin was understanding about the late nights at first. He'd text me to see if I needed anything, tell me to drive safe. Sometimes he'd even offer to pick up dinner. But as the project intensified, as the late nights became the norm rather than the exception, his texts became less frequent. The offers of help faded. He'd be asleep when I got home, or already in bed reading when I'd finally drag myself upstairs. I tried to explain the intricacies of what we were working on, the breakthroughs, the frustrations, but his eyes would glaze over. "Sounds like a lot, babe," he'd say, and then turn back to his financial news app. It wasn't a lack of caring, I told myself. It was just different interests. But it felt like a wall, a thick, soundproof wall, growing between us. Daniel listened. He didn't just listen, he heard me. He'd pick up on the nuances, the unspoken anxieties, the small triumphs. We'd debrief after meetings, often with just the two of us left in the office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the city lights twinkling outside the windows. We talked about work, then about our lives, our dreams, our disappointments. I found myself telling him things I hadn't articulated to anyone, not even Kevin. My secret fear that I wasn't as good as I pretended to be, my quiet longing for something more creative, something less corporate. He didn't judge. He just listened, eyes intense, occasionally offering a perspective that would make me see myself and my situation in a new light. One night, after a particularly grueling presentation that had gone flawlessly, We decided to celebrate. It was past 11, and the only place still open near the office was this dive bar, dark and smelling faintly of stale beer and desperation. We sat in a corner booth, nursing cheap whiskey, the adrenaline still coursing through us. The conversation flowed, easier than breathing. We talked about our childhoods, about music, about books. I remember him telling me about his dream of sailing around the world, and I found myself picturing it, feeling a phantom sea breeze on my face. And then he looked at me, really looked at me, across the sticky table, and for a moment, the world outside that booth just ceased to exist. His eyes were warm, full of an intensity I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You're amazing, you know that," he said, his voice a low murmur above the din of the bar. My breath caught. I felt a flush creep up my neck. "No, I'm really not," I mumbled, suddenly shy. "Yeah, you are," he insisted, leaning forward slightly. "You're brilliant, you're funny, and you have this way of seeing the beauty in things that most people overlook. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." It wasn't to come on, not overtly. It was just pure, unadulterated admiration, and it landed like a punch to my gut, a beautiful, devastating punch. Because somewhere deep down, I hadn't felt beautiful or brilliant or even particularly seen in a very, very long time. Not like that. Not with that kind of genuine, direct appreciation. We stayed there until the bartender started stacking chairs, laughing, talking, just connecting. When we finally walked out into the cool night air, the streets were empty, save for a few taxis. We stood by the curb, the silence between us suddenly thick with unspoken things. I felt a pull, a desperate, undeniable magnetic force. He reached out, slowly, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my cheek, sending a shiver through me. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. "I should go," I whispered, even though every fiber of my being wanted to lean into his touch. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yeah, me too." We said goodnight, and I watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the city night. I got in my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The drive home was a blur. My mind was racing, a chaotic mix of exhilaration and terror. I was married, happily married, supposedly. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. But the feeling in my chest, the lightness, the aliveness, I hadn't felt like that in years. Over the next few weeks, the line blurred even further. We'd find excuses to work late, just the two of us, or we'd grab a quick dinner after a long day, just to debrief. The conversations grew more intimate. The glances lingered longer. The physical tension was a palpable thing in the room whenever we were alone, a humming current that charged the air. I started dressing a little nicer for work, taking more time with my hair, picking out clothes I knew he'd appreciate. I felt like a teenager again, full of nervous energy and anticipation. The guilt was a constant companion, a sharp little stone in my shoe. I'd go home to Kevin, and he'd be there, solid and oblivious, making dinner or watching a game. He'd kiss me hello, a familiar peck on the cheek, and I'd feel a pang so intense it almost made me flinch. I was lying by omission, living a double life. Every casual touch from Kevin, every shared laugh, felt like a betrayal. I started making excuses to him more frequently, needing to stay late, meeting up with a client, hitting the gym late. He never questioned me. Not really. He trusted me, and that trust was a weight heavier than any lie I concocted. The first time it happened, it was an accident, or at least that's what I told myself for a long time. We were at a corporate event, a fancy networking mixer, the kind where everyone dresses up and makes forced conversation. We'd worked the room, talked to all the right people, and eventually found ourselves tucked away in a quiet corner, away from the polite chatter. We were sharing a drink, talking about how much we hated these events, when his hand brushed mine, accidentally on purpose. A jolt, electric and immediate. My breath hitched. He didn't pull away. Instead, he intertwined our fingers, his thumb stroking the back of my hand, slow and deliberate. My heart was doing acrobatics. I looked up at him, and his eyes were dark, intense, burning with the same desire that was consuming me. In that moment, surrounded by hundreds of people, it felt like we were the only two in the universe. I felt a desperate craving, a hunger that had been dormant for so long, now roaring to life. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, our hands clasped, our eyes locked. Then, without a word, he squeezed my hand, a silent promise, and released it. The air felt thin, charged. Later that night, as I was waiting for my Uber, he walked me out. The street was quiet, streetlights casting long shadows. He stopped me by my car, his hand gently on my arm. My body was humming, every nerve ending alive. He leaned in, slowly, his gaze still holding mine, and then he kissed me. It wasn't a tentative peck. It was deep, hungry, demanding, a kiss that spoke of weeks of unspoken longing, of suppressed desires.
And I kissed him back, with the same desperation, the same raw hunger. All the guilt, all the promises, all the years of my life with Kevin, they vanished in the heat of that moment. It was pure sensation, pure feeling. It was everything I had been missing. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I could still taste the whiskey and him on my lips. My legs felt weak. He looked at me, a question in his eyes, and I knew what it was. I knew what I was risking. And in that moment, I just didn't care. "My place is just around the corner," he murmured, his voice husky. I nodded, unable to speak, unable to think. My brain was a fog, overridden by instinct, by a craving for this new, thrilling, dangerous feeling. I called Kevin and mumbled some excuse about hitting a late-night diner with a client, knowing he'd buy it. He always bought it. Then I followed Daniel into the quiet, chilly night, my heart thumping a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. His apartment was modern, minimalist, high up in a sleek downtown building with a view of the city lights. It was nothing like our cozy, lived-in suburban house. It felt detached, anonymous, a perfect setting for something illicit. The moment the door closed behind us, the pretense evaporated. We fell into each other, his hands in my hair, mine tearing at his shirt. It was urgent, primal, overwhelming. The sex was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was passionate, uninhibited, almost violent in its intensity. He made me feel seen, desired, adored, in a way Kevin hadn't in years. He explored my body with a hunger that was both intoxicating and terrifying. With him, I wasn't just a wife, a partner, a mother-to-be, a secret I was carrying, a silent, growing dread. I was just me, raw and exposed, and completely, utterly wanted. The next morning, I woke up in his bed, the city a distant hum outside his panoramic windows. The sunlight streaming through the blinds felt harsh, revealing the stark reality of what I had done. The shame hit me like a physical blow, a cold, heavy weight settling in my stomach. I was a married woman. I had cheated. I had betrayed Kevin, the good, kind man who loved me, who trusted me implicitly, the man I had promised forever to. Daniel was still asleep, his arm thrown over me, his breath soft against my hair. He looked peaceful, innocent. I gently extricated myself, needing to put distance between us, between me and the enormity of my actions. I dressed quickly, my movements jerky, my mind a whirl of confusion and self-loathing. I left a quick note, a vague, had-to-get-to-work-early scrawl, and slipped out of his apartment like a thief in the night. The drive home was agony. The city, usually a source of comfort and energy, felt alien, judgmental. Every car that passed me seemed to be looking. Every pedestrian seemed to know my secret. I pulled into our driveway, the familiar 2-story house looming, solid and unwavering. It looked so normal, so innocent. How could I walk back into that life, into that house, knowing what I had done? Kevin was just finishing his coffee, reading the paper at the kitchen island, Buster curled at his feet. He looked up, a soft smile on his face. "Morning, Sleeping Beauty," he said, his voice warm. "Rough night?" My throat was dry. I managed a weak smile. "Yeah, long one." He nodded, not noticing the tremor in my voice, the frantic pounding of my heart. He had no idea. He saw nothing but the wife he knew, the wife he loved.
And in that moment, the guilt was almost unbearable. I wanted to confess, to scream it all out, to unburden myself, but the words caught in my throat, strangled by fear and shame. What would I say? Hey, honey, I just spent the night with another man, but he made me feel really alive, so it's okay, right? No, that wasn't an option. So I buried it. I buried the guilt, the shame, the confusion under layers of feigned normalcy. I kissed Kevin, hugged Buster, made small talk about our plans for the weekend, and all the while, a part of me was screaming, a silent, internal scream that no one could hear. But once a line is crossed, it's almost impossible to uncross it. The affair continued. It became a pattern. Late nights at work turned into late nights at Daniel's. Dinners with clients turned into intimate meals with him. The lies grew more intricate, more elaborate. I started canceling plans with friends, with Kevin, always with a plausible excuse. My life became a carefully constructed facade. One life for Kevin, one for Daniel. With Daniel, I felt vibrant, reckless, free. He brought out a side of me I didn't know existed, a daring, spontaneous woman who laughed loudly, who wasn't afraid to take risks. He made me feel desired in a way that was intoxicating. Our conversations were electric, our physical connection undeniable. He was a drug, and I was addicted. With Kevin, I felt a deep, profound sadness. Every kind gesture from him twisted a knife in my gut. Every time he looked at me with love in his eyes, I felt like a monster. I tried to be extra loving, extra attentive to him, almost as a form of penance, a desperate attempt to balance the scales. I'd cook his favorite meals, surprise him with small gifts, initiate sex more often, but it felt hollow, forced. The physical intimacy with him, once comforting, now felt like a betrayal of Daniel, and more importantly, a betrayal of myself. It was a vicious cycle of guilt and desperation. The emotional toll was immense. I was constantly on edge, always checking my phone, always making sure my stories aligned. I lived in a state of hyper-awareness, jumpy, secretive. Sleep became elusive, haunted by dreams of being exposed, of Kevin's devastated face. My friends started to notice, asking if everything was okay, if I was stressed about work. I'd brush them off, forcing a laugh, saying I was just swamped. The truth was, I was drowning. One afternoon, I was at Daniel's apartment, curled up on his sofa after another intense afternoon. He was in the kitchen making coffee, and I, stupidly, carelessly, picked up his phone just to check the time. It was sitting unlocked on the coffee table. A text message popped up on the screen, a new one, from a contact saved simply as Chloe. Hey, just checking in. You were amazing last night. Can't wait for Friday. My blood ran cold. The coffee Daniel brought me went untouched. My hands started to shake. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone across the room. Chloe, last night, Friday. It was all there, stark and undeniable. He came back into the living room, a warm smile on his face, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. He saw the phone in my hand, saw my face. The smile vanished. His eyes widened, a flicker of panic. What's wrong? He asked, his voice guarded. I looked at him, my eyes burning with tears, with a sudden, searing pain. Who's Chloe? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. She's no one, really. Just a friend. Just a friend who thinks you were amazing last night? I shot back, the words laced with venom. The hypocrisy, the utter audacity of it was suffocating. I, the cheater, was being cheated on. It was a cosmic joke, a brutal reflection of my own actions. He tried to explain, tried to minimize it, said it was a mistake, a one-off, that I was the one he wanted. But the words were hollow, ringing false in my ears. I saw him for what he was, a man who was capable of deception, just like me. And in that moment, the intoxicating spell he had cast over me shattered. All the longing, all the electric connection, it dissolved into a bitter ash. I stood up, shaking, feeling utterly ridiculous, utterly heartbroken, utterly furious. Don't, I said, holding up a hand when he reached for me. Don't touch me. You know what? You're just like me. You're a liar, a cheat. The words tasted like bile. He looked genuinely hurt, or at least he acted like it. It's not like that. We weren't exclusive, Sarah. We never said anything about exclusivity. We didn't have to, I shouted, the dam finally breaking. I'm married, Daniel. I'm literally risking everything for you, and you're just doing this to other people? What kind of person are you? What kind of person am I? I grabbed my bag, my movements frantic. He tried to stop me, tried to pull me back, but I pushed him away. I needed to get out, away from him, away from his lies, away from the reflection of my own monstrous actions. I ran out of his apartment, the door slamming behind me, the sound echoing the finality of it all. The breakup with Daniel was messy, punctuated by angry texts and tearful phone calls, but eventually it settled into a cold silence. The affair was over, but the consequences were just beginning. Without Daniel, without the thrill, the distraction, I was left alone with my thoughts, with the raw, gaping wound of what I had done. The guilt, once a persistent whisper, now became a deafening roar. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. My mind replayed every moment, every lie, every stolen kiss. I looked at Kevin, at his kind, unsuspecting face, and a wave of nausea would wash over me. I was a fraud, and the weight of it was crushing me. One evening, Kevin came home early. He found me sitting on the living room floor, staring blankly at the TV, Buster resting his head on my lap. He took one look at me, at my pale face, my haunted eyes, and knew something was profoundly wrong. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, his voice gentle, settling beside me. He put an arm around me, and I stiffened, a silent scream building in my chest. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The dam broke. The words tumbled out of me, a torrent of confession, ugly and raw. I told him everything. About Daniel, about the late nights, about the feeling of being seen, about the sex, about the apartment, about the betrayal. I spared him no detail, no matter how excruciating it was for me to recount. I wanted him to understand the full scope of my monstrosity. He just sat there, utterly still, listening. His arms slowly dropped from my shoulders. His face, usually so open and kind, became a mask of disbelief, then horror, then a pain so profound it made my own chest ache. His eyes, usually warm and loving, turned cold, distant, utterly broken.
When I finally finished, the room was silent, except for my ragged breathing and the soft thudding of my own heart. He didn't scream, he didn't yell, he didn't even cry. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something shatter. You cheated on me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if he couldn't quite comprehend the words. "With your colleague? All this time? All those late nights? That's what you were doing?" I could only nod, tears streaming down my face, blurring my vision. He stood up slowly, deliberately, as if in a daze. He walked to the window, his back to me, staring out into the twilight. His shoulders were hunched, the strong, familiar line of them now conveying an unbearable weight. "Why?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Why would you do that, Sarah? What did I do?" "You didn't do anything," I choked out, my voice raw. "It wasn't you, Kevin. It was me. I was selfish. I was lost. I don't know why. I don't know why I did it. It was the truth. I truly didn't understand the depth of the self-sabotage, the betrayal of the man I loved." He turned back to me, and his eyes were filled with such a deep, soul-crushing anguish that it took my breath away. "I trusted you," he said, each word a hammer blow. "I loved you. I built my whole life around you, and you just threw it all away." The next few hours, days, weeks were a blur of pain and recrimination. He moved into the guest room that night. The house, once full of laughter and the comfortable sounds of our life, became a tomb. We spoke in hushed tones, or not at all. Every word was loaded, every silence heavy. Our friends started calling, sensing the shift, but I deflected, offering vague excuses. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. Kevin, to his credit, kept it quiet too, at least at first. The shame was suffocating. He asked me to leave. He couldn't look at me, he said. He couldn't be in the same house. So I packed a small bag and moved into a tiny, impersonal Airbnb on the other side of town. The suburban house, our home, the place we had built our dreams, felt utterly desolate. I missed Buster more than words could say. The divorce proceedings were clinical, brutal. The discussions about who got what, who kept the house, how to divide our lives. Each item, each piece of furniture, each shared memory felt like a fresh wound. He didn't want to see me, didn't want to talk to me unless it was through lawyers. His anger, once muted, became a tangible, burning thing. He hated me, and I deserved it. My work suffered. My performance, once stellar, became erratic. My boss called me into his office, asking if everything was okay. I just mumbled about personal issues, unable to look him in the eye. I felt like a pariah, a walking, talking lie. The life I had so meticulously built, the stable, comforting existence, had imploded. I tried to reach out to Kevin a few times, desperate for some sliver of forgiveness, some sign that the person he once loved was still there, somewhere beneath the rubble. But he just shut me down, cold and final. "There's nothing left to say, Sarah," he'd text. "You broke it beyond repair." He was right. I had. I had taken something beautiful, something precious, and I had shattered it with my own reckless hands. And I knew, deep in my bones, that I could never fully put it back together. The betrayal wasn't just his. It was mine too.
I had betrayed myself, the woman I thought I was, the values I claimed to hold. Now, months later, I'm in a small apartment, nowhere near the house I used to call home. I see Kevin's posts on social media sometimes, shared by mutual friends. He looks lighter. He's going out, laughing, living a life without me. He deserves it. He deserves every bit of happiness he can find. And I'm left here with the echoes of my own choices, the stark reality of the consequences. There's no easy ending to this, no neat little bow, just the quiet hum of regret, a constant companion. The pain is a dull ache, always there, a reminder of what I lost, what I destroyed. And I know, with a chilling certainty, that it's a pain I'm going to carry for a very, very long time. It's the price of betrayal, and it's a steep one.